A Baldur's Gate TV series is officially in development, and what immediately sets the project apart from the long list of video game adaptations that have come and gone is one very deliberate creative choice. This show is set to follow on from the events of Baldur's Gate 3. That decision alone reframes what the series could be. Instead of rebooting the franchise, retelling a familiar story, or loosely borrowing names and locations while discarding the heart of the source material, this series is positioning itself as a continuation of one of the most celebrated role playing games ever made. It is a bold move, and bold is exactly what a Baldur's Gate adaptation needs to be. Baldur's Gate 3 wasn't just successful in a traditional sense. It didn't simply sell well or review well. It redefined expectations. At a time when many RPGs had drifted towards simplification and spectacle over substance, Larian Studios delivered a game that doubled down on player agency, narrative complexity, and consequence driven storytelling. It became a crossover hit that appealed to longtime CRPG fans, tabletop Dungeons and Dragons players, and newcomers who had never touched the series before. That level of impact means any continuation, especially in a different medium, carries enormous weight. One of the most fascinating challenges facing the TV series is the question of canon. Baldur's Gate 3 famously does not have a single ending. The fate of the city, the companions, and even the wider world can change dramatically depending on the player's choices. Some characters can live, die, ascend, fall, or disappear entirely. Entire storylines can be resolved in radically different ways. By choosing to continue the story rather than adapt it directly, the series is implicitly acknowledging that it must select a version of events and commit to it. That might sound risky, but it is actually one of the most faithful decisions the creators could make. Dungeons and Dragons has always been about parallel outcomes. Every tabletop campaign is technically canon to the people who played it, even if those stories contradict one another. A Baldur's Gate TV series that presents itself as one possible outcome rather than the definitive version fits perfectly within that tradition. The key will be clarity. The show doesn't need to validate every ending, but it does need to feel internally consistent and emotionally honest about the consequences of the path it chooses. Setting the series after Baldur's Gate 3 also avoids one of the biggest pitfalls of video game adaptations: comparison. Trying to recreate the game's story beat for beat would be a losing battle. The strength of Baldur's Gate 3 lies in its interactivity, its freedom, and its responsiveness to player decisions. No television series could replicate that. By moving the timeline forward, the show gains the freedom to tell a new story while still benefiting from the rich groundwork the game laid. This opens up some genuinely compelling narrative possibilities. The city of Baldur's Gate has survived yet another cataclysmic threat, but survival does not mean recovery. Political power vacuums, public fear, religious upheaval, and lingering trauma would all be natural consequences of the absolute crisis. The series can explore how a city that has been saved too many times begins to change, and how ordinary people live in the aftermath of extraordinary events. That kind of grounded perspective is often where fantasy storytelling is at its strongest. There's also the question of characters. Baldur's Gate 3 introduced a cast that quickly became beloved, debated, memed, and emotionally dissected by the community. Bringing those characters into a TV series is tempting, but it has to be handled with restraint. If the show leans too heavily on familiar faces, it risks alienating viewers who haven't played the game. If it ignores them entirely, it risks feeling disconnected from the very story it claims to continue. The most effective approach would be to let returning characters exist as part of the world rather than the center of it, allowing their presence to add depth without demanding prior knowledge. Tone may be the most important ingredient of all. Baldur's Gate 3 succeeds because it understands the true nature of Dungeons and Dragons. It is not purely grimdark fantasy, nor is it a constant comedy. It is a setting where existential horror, personal tragedy, awkward romance, and absurd humor coexist naturally. Any adaptation that flattens that range into a single mood will feel wrong. The Forgotten Realms are compelling because they feel alive, unpredictable, and occasionally ridiculous, and the TV series must embrace that rather than shy away from it. The timing of this project is also worth examining. Fantasy television is in a volatile period. Budgets are massive, audiences are selective, and patience is thin. Viewers are no longer willing to give genre shows multiple seasons to find their footing. At the same time, Baldur's Gate 3 proved that there is still a massive appetite for thoughtful, complex fantasy when it is made with care and confidence. The challenge will be translating that care into a medium that often prioritizes immediacy over depth. If this series succeeds, it could represent a turning point, not just for Baldur's Gate, but for video game adaptations as a whole. It could demonstrate that games with deep narratives don't need to be simplified to work on screen, and that respecting the intelligence of the audience is not a liability. It could also expand the Forgotten Realms in a way that feels additive rather than extractive, creating a feedback loop where games, television, and tabletop storytelling enrich one another. If it fails, the reasons will likely be familiar: a misunderstanding of what made the source material resonate, a lack of patience with character development, a fear of complexity. The margin for error is slim, but so is the margin for mediocrity. Baldur's Gate is not a franchise that thrives on playing it safe, and this TV series shouldn't either. Right now, though, the concept alone is enough to be cautiously optimistic. A Baldur's Gate TV series that acknowledges consequence, continuity, and the messy reality of choice is exactly the kind of adaptations fans have been asking for, whether they realized it or not. Following on from Baldur's Gate 3 is not the easiest path forward, but it is the one most aligned with the soul of the franchise. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And if you want to support the channel and get even more content, check out my Patreon, where the latest exclusive takes a deep look at games that changed their genre forever. Until next time, game on.